Well, we're here with Rosalyn Bird, and I'm in Prince George today for a special meeting with the new Conservative Party of BC candidate for the riding of Prince George-Valemount, Rosalyn Bird. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I guess the first thing is to let's get to know you a little bit, and that would be just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. Well, I spent most of my career I spent my whole career actually in the Canadian Forces. I joined the Navy when I was about a year out of high school, and that was a extensive career. I served 23 years. It was very interesting. It was something I actually continually miss. Mm-hmm. The Forces offers you an opportunity to do a lot of different things if you're interested in pursuing different things.
Right.
And I had a rather interesting career. Most people join the military and do the same thing throughout their career. I actually spanned 2 trades as a non-commissioned member, and then I actually ended up commissioning about halfway through my career, and I retired as a logistics officer.
Okay.
So,
well, you know, they say that people in life have many different careers. Why not in the military?
yeah, I just happen to have mine in one career span that normally is fairly steady, but I had a lot of opportunities to do different things, so I really, really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. And tell us, how long have you lived here in Prince George, and you have family here?
I do have family here, and I'm actually fairly new to Prince George. I moved here about 19 months ago. So I'm married. My husband was born and raised here, okay. And I met him when I was living on Vancouver Island, and that was just before COVID. And during COVID, when you had lockdowns and you had, families separated and, relationships changing, we decided towards the end of that we would like to have a change and be a little closer to family. And my mom and dad at the time lived in Charlottetown, PEI. My dad actually still lives there. And we decided that was a little too far away. So we looked at some property, and we were successful in finding a piece that we liked up here in Prince George. So we moved back up here. And my husband has adult children. 2 of them live here in Prince George, and his dad is still here. So,
okay,
and
great.
We were lucky enough to find a piece of property actually that's quite close, within 15 minutes to everybody. So,
nice, very nice. So 23 years in the military, that's a long time. Why have you decided at this time to run for MLA for Prince George-Valemount?
There's a number of different reasons actually. Primarily, well, what got me interested in it to start with was meeting John Rustad, to be honest. So it was never actually my intention to become a candidate. It was a progressive thing. But I did meet him because I was upset about some of the things that had happened during COVID, with the lockdowns and with the mandates. And I was quite active in educating people about Bill 36, which is the Healthcare Practitioners and Occupations Act.
Right.
I'm not in agreement with that piece of legislation. So I did town halls, and that is actually how I was introduced to John. We ended up doing a town hall about that together. He from an elected official perspective, and just from my perspective as a concerned citizen.
Right.
And along with that and my concerns during COVID and beyond, I'm not happy with some of the government overreach that I've seen from my perspective anyway. Mm-hmm. And there's things that are happening that I'm just not generally happy with. Education, I have grandchildren now, and I'm worried about how they will progress and what their success will be in the current education system. The economy is concerning, not just for me, but I would say for the majority of people that live in the province. I want my kids, I want my grandkids to be able to have, good paying jobs. I'd like them to be able to buy homes. I want them to have backyards for their kids to run around in. Mm-hmm. And, there's lots of questions right now about whether that continues to be possible for young people and the next generation.
Right. And so many of us talk about, how bad things are, how good things are, but we don't really do things about it. So you've decided to step into the ring, which is not an easy transition. You have no background in politics?
I have no background in politics.
Okay. All right.
And I wouldn't say you're right, it's not an easy transition, but it's an interesting transition. I would say one of my strengths, quite frankly, is I really enjoy people. I enjoy people on every level. And I like talking to people. and I like problem solving, and I like to help people move through problems and get themselves into a position of betterment.
Well, that may be the job description there for MLA you've just listed, so that's great. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, first of all, about the Conservative Party of BC and the Conservative Party of Canada. And I know that there are people who are confusing the two. Can you kind of clear that up for us? Is there any connection between the two?
The name.
Okay.
So we share the Conservative name, and there are principles and ideas that do overlap between the federal party and the provincial party. But this, yes, so the Conservative Party of BC is a provincial party, and we are provincial focused. Right. So, we are looking at ideas that are going to benefit the residents of British Columbia. Now, they may overlap, similar to principles, and benefit other areas of Canada, but our primary focus is making people's lives here in the province more affordable and improving the betterment overall.
Right, but a completely separate organization.
Completely separate, that's right. Yeah, we aren't funded by the federal party. We, like I said, we have some similar ideas, but our platforms are different, our ideas are different. I would even say leadership styles are actually quite different.
Well, let's get into some of that, because I went to the Conservative Party of British Columbia's website and I took off the principles of the Conservative Party. I just wanted to briefly touch on them, because I think it's important for people to understand that this is this party's platform and principles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one is listed as good government, a belief that good government is ethical, accountable, fiscally responsible, and enforces the rule of law to provide for the peace and security of our society. A further belief in smaller, less intrusive, more efficient government to afford the greatest amount of freedom with the least amount of taxation. And I'm sure that's, the Conservative Party of Canada definitely supports that, to my knowledge anyway. Second item listed is individual liberty and freedom, a belief that every individual has value, that life and liberty are fundamental and an inviolable right, and that everyone is born equal to enjoy life in a tolerant society that respects their individuality and freedom of speech, religion, and assembly. Social responsibility, a belief in a strong social safety net that cares for the vulnerable in our society while encouraging individual self-sufficiency. And free enterprise economy, a belief that a competitive free enterprise economy with the right to private property are essential to encourage the entrepreneurial spirit that creates prosperity. So those are the espoused principles of the Conservative Party of BC. On their website, the first thing you see when you click on the Conservative Party of BC's website is this saying, "Let's bring common sense back to BC." Do you want to comment on that? Do you agree with that?
I think it's imperative. I think it's imperative. I think when you get governments and or leaders that have been in positions for long periods of time, I think they have a tendency, not intentionally, but to lose focus and to lose relation with the people that they are serving. I also think that there has been a tendency in the last few years, in every level of government actually, not specifically provincial, federal, provincial, municipal, even regional districts, there seems to have been a role reversal where the government, the elected officials, it's their job to work for us, not the other way around. And that seems to have switched. So I think we need to bring good governance and transparency, ethical, honest decisions. And I think we also need to bring back collaborative and engagement process, which I also think have reduced significantly in the last few years within the government.
Okay.
So I think a common sense approach to that makes sense. I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate things.
Sure.
So yeah, I totally agree with that. We need to get back to basics.
Okay. Let's drill down a little bit into, so those are the overarching principles of the party. These are the first item of the Conservative Party of BC platform is split into 9 categories, and this is the first item from each of those categories, and I just want to briefly talk on a little bit about some of them. Cost of living. Number 1, end the ICBC monopoly. ICBC is a bloated, ineffective government monopoly that charges some of the highest rates in the country. It's time to allow choice and competition so that British Columbians can shop around for the price and plan that's right for them. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think it is important. I think it's important for people to have choice. I don't think ICBC is the only agency or corporate structure that has gotten larger than it should be and has moved away from benefiting the people that are actually paying that structure. We have some serious concerns with the no-fault insurance, of course, and I think it is administratively, it is burdened. So I think it could be better managed, and I think there needs to be a full review. And the cost of doing that, I honestly believe will come back and benefit those of us that are insured through that organization by reducing insurance rates.
Second category is listed as the economy. Lower taxes, smaller government. You touched on that a little bit yourself. The government is an inefficient delivery vehicle for services, and its growth is cannibalizing private sector job creation. Wasteful spending should be cut and savings returned to taxpayers. I'm assuming you agree with that, since that's almost what you said a few minutes ago.
I do agree with that, and this is an interesting one because this one overlaps into a number of the other areas that we are going to cover. I mean, obviously taxes and cost of living is extremely important to everybody that lives in the province. The carbon tax obviously is the top of everybody's list, and we would like to get rid of it as a party, and it's an exuberant tax, and it is a tax that it is applied to every single thing, every industry, and it doesn't matter what it is that you bring into your house, it's affected by a carbon tax. I mean, I looked at my hydro bill the other day, and my usage, I'm paying $14. My carbon tax, I'm paying twice that. I'm paying $33, and then I'm paying GST on top of that.
Right,
so
right.
Taxes is a big issue, of course, for everybody, and affects everybody's cost of living.
Right, and you've kind of segued already into the next category, which is energy and the environment. The headline there is "Scrap the Carbon Tax." This is obviously a recurring theme in the Conservative Party of BC.
And they overlap, like I said.
Right. The next category is forestry, mining, and BC's resource industry. Now, this is very important to Prince George, obviously. It's very important to the Valemount area and to McBride, and the whole region depends heavily on Mackenzie. Yeah, but I'm speaking of our particular riding, looking at in terms of forestry as a major impactor. Support BC forestry. Well, that's kind of a bread and butter kind of term. BC forest industry is the envy of the world. It's 100% sustainable and renewable, supports tens of thousands of high-paying jobs across the province. Forestry is an evolving industry. It changes pretty much every year. There's major changes to forestry. What do you see as MLA that could be helpful to the Robson Valley and to the Prince George area in terms of forestry and support for the forestry industry?
Well, as a party, we're actually extremely lucky due to the background of our leader, John Rustad. Forestry is where his family has operated for many, many years. So they were in that sector. So he comes with a tremendous amount of knowledge and a number of ideas about how he would like to I don't even think they're new ideas. I think he would like to see a remanagement of the forestry industry, and he would like it to be progressive, he would like it to be economical, and he would like it to be bringing back significant profit back to the province. I think there's a number of issues that are complicating that at the moment, and it is something that he's very passionate about, working within the industry and stakeholders within that industry to revitalize it and, bring that money back to communities and revitalize communities in that process.
Right. Well, very important, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot about that on the campaign trail particularly from our constituency as well. Education is another platform item. Support parents' choices. Parents have the right to determine how and where their children will be educated. Government must provide fair and reasonable funding for families for the type of education they choose for their children. This includes public, private, or homeschooling. Now, talking about a hornet's nest, education and the way it's managed is not an easy thing, and it has been the subject of many, many heated discussions over the years. What's your take on that?
Particularly in the last year, yes.
Yes. What's your take on it?
Education is one of the primary areas that actually concerns me. Now, I don't have an education background. However, reading some of the information that's been made available publicly in the last few years, and the actual abilities of graduating students are concerning. So I think our education system needs to be completely reviewed. Personally, I would actually even like to see a new learning model adapted into schools. I don't think we're teaching kids how to critically think anymore. I think we're teaching kids what to think, but I don't think we're teaching kids how to think. There was a study that was released from the Fraser Institute that had some fairly concerning statistics in it about, a percentage of high school students, well, particularly it looked at grade 10 students, but, there was a significantly higher than should be illiteracy rate or, lack of ability to read and comprehend at that grade level. I'm not sure how somebody gets to grade 10 if they are struggling with reading and writing. They reported similar statistics, although higher with math. Mm-hmm. I don't think a high school student that graduates should have to upgrade in order to be eligible to attend post-secondary university. Now, if you're going into a specialized program like engineering or a doctor, you want to be a doctor and you're missing courses, or you need to increase your grade to get into a program, that's different than actually not meeting the basic eligibility requirements for post-secondary. If a student graduates from high school and they don't meet the minimum requirements, I think we failed them actually. I think we failed them as students, and I think we have failed our province in general. If we don't have well-educated, graduating students that can't read, can't write, aren't literate, can't do basic math, can't read a tape measure, we're really going to struggle to be able to move them industries, progress industries, and for them to have good, solid paying jobs in order for them to have, happy, healthy lives, buy houses. Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring you around to the small communities of McBride and Valemount and smaller areas, schools that exist in the Dunster area, an example. We have particular challenges in terms of numbers of students, keeping schools open, keeping schools active, busing, those kinds of things. What can you add to that discussion about smaller schools? Because it's one thing for Prince George to sit here with the school district headquarters here in Prince George and make decisions for the entire school district. However, is it being thought through to the very smallest levels, right? And what can be done in terms of small schools and keeping them active and vibrant? Because the last thing we want to do is lose any of our schools.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it's even being completely thought through here in Prince George, to be honest, because one of the things that we indicate on the platform is that we would like different education models or different options to be available to students. That may look like homeschooling, it may look like distance schooling, it may look like an independent different learning model. So I think when I say that we need to look at education as a whole and possibly an entire new model, I think we need to incorporate some creative solutions because of the issues that you're talking about. The other thing I think the education system is lacking, and probably far more predominantly in smaller communities, is resources to help students that have particular learning needs that aren't met by traditional education mechanisms. Kids with dyslexia, kids with other learning disabilities. Those types of things are very hard to find resources, even in big centers. So I would certainly imagine that smaller communities like McBride and Valemount are having the same challenges. So I think we need to open up funding, and I think we need to come up with much more creative, fluid solutions to address those types of concerns.
I think we proved that it can be done, because that's what happened during the COVID times. There were creative solutions to that. Many students in both Valemount and McBride area don't get the opportunity to have some of the programs and courses that they need for furthering their education in college or university levels. They're just not available because of the student numbers. So it's a challenge, and it's something that it's not going away, but we do need to think about.
I think the other piece with education too is I don't think we can, and I'll end up using this term probably again later when we're talking about another issue. I'm not a fan of paintbrush solutions, so I actually like individuals to be looked at as individuals. So I don't like solutions that are broad and are anticipated to help everybody. I think students in particular need to be looked at as individuals and what their individual needs are. And yes, I recognize that that comes with an increase in resources and you need more of this, you need more of that. But that doesn't mean you can't take those considerations when you're looking at new bottles and you're looking at solutions that can be collective and, used for
Right.
Yeah. Different levels and different sizes of communities.
I understand. Healthcare. Serious substantive reform. 3 words. The performance of British Columbia's healthcare system throughout the COVID-19 pandemic has been abysmal. Chronic shortages in physicians, nurses, and ICU capacity has become painstakingly clear. It's time for serious reform. Comment on that, because it's somewhat controversial, what's being said there in the party platform.
I don't think the fact that healthcare needs to be addressed, that's not controversial.
I would agree with that.
I would say that if somebody hasn't had an individual experience that has been positive here in BC within healthcare, that they would say that, but I would also say that they would agree that healthcare as a whole in this province needs some serious attention and serious funding. And again, there needs to be new ideas, new solutions, and new mechanisms brought into that industry also. We have a significant shortage of not just healthcare workers, nurses, and doctors. We have a significant number of healthcare professionals across all occupations and professions. So anywhere from doctors, nurses, x-ray technicians, optometrists, chiropractors. I don't think you could pick an occupation within the healthcare field where we couldn't use an increase of skills. Mm-hmm. There's a number of reasons, and there's a number of things that we could do to change that. As I'm sure you're aware, this party has no intentions of leaving unvaccinated healthcare workers out of work. We have a large number of people in this province that are extremely well trained and want to work in the field and have been denied that opportunity for a personal choice that they made around their own healthcare. And that needs to be reversed immediately. And I think we need to look at some new models within healthcare. Maybe it looks like a 2-tier health system, and that makes people very nervous, and they kind of get their back up against the wall immediately regarding that. But there are multiple countries in the world that operate on a 2-tier system. It does not mean that this tier gets all the poor healthcare and this tier gets all the good healthcare. There are mechanisms where you can balance those 2 systems together that just free up wait times, they free up surgery times, they free up the ability to see specialists, to get very specific types of care that are hard to access generally, let alone, across the province and across the country. So I think there's lots and lots of opportunity in that field for increased jobs and for creative solutions and for new opportunities and far different outcomes than what we're currently seeing.
It's not an easy solution, and that and education are probably going to be your 2 biggest hornet's nest, let's put it that way, in terms of making substantive changes, because the systems are ingrained and they've been done a certain way for many, many years, and it's difficult to get people to open their eyes in terms of changing the system, because they feel they're going to lose something. No one wants to go to an American system, right? Nobody wants to have that.
No, and that's not what I'm not suggesting an American system at all.
I understand that, but people are afraid of that.
Absolutely,
that's the big fear.
Absolutely.
Your point here that the system is abysmal. Well, we love our abysmal system. It's what we know. Certainly it can be made better. That nobody's questioning that, but certainly a challenge. And I'd be very interested in seeing what the meat of the platform is in terms of making those kinds of changes to both healthcare and education, because they are. I'm not sure. So I am not happy with the current healthcare system. I don't know if I would actually inject the word dismal in there. Abysmal.
Oh, abysmal. I thought you said dismal.
Yeah, sorry, no, abysmal.
I'm not sure I would inject that in there I actually think that BC has the opportunity and has the capacity to be one of the leading healthcare providers in the country. We have excellent universities here. We have excellent training here. We have an entire industry that falls outside of healthcare in regards to medical fields. And I think it's something that we can be very progressive and we can be successful pursuing in the future. So I think that industry has tremendous potential for growth, for jobs, and for innovation.
Right. Well, let's talk about more on the social side: mental illness, homelessness, and the BC opioid crisis. That's the next item on the platform, and a statement to reopen mental hospitals, reopen and revitalize mental hospitals and facilities to give suffering British Columbians the help that they deserve. BC, some areas of BC, Prince George is no stranger to this as well. What's your comment on that party platform?
Well, that actually, that significantly overlaps into healthcare.
Right.
And that is an extremely complex issue. And this is where my paintbrush comment comes back again.
Right.
So the challenge with dealing with mental health and addictions is they both overlap. For more times than not, actually, they overlap. As far as opening mental hospitals, I do not like the term mental hospital, to be quite frank with you. I would like to see, mental health communities. I would like to see recovery communities, and I would like to see services and supports in regards to those issues significantly increase in the province. I don't believe that you can provide housing for somebody that is struggling not just with addiction, but with mental health and cognitive issues. Yes, having a house is extremely important, and it answers one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And it does, inject a layer of dignity and safety and ownership to that individual. But I'm not sure that is appreciated, and I'm not sure that without helping them in other areas that you are going to, that's not the solution. It's not a
Right.
single solution.
No, it's just a pillar.
It's a pillar. So I think we need to, and again, it's very complicated and it's very complex, and it's something that isn't going to be resolved in 6 months or a year or probably 2. But we need to figure out a process where we are helping people that aren't able to help themselves return and being functioning within their community and the society. So housing is just one piece of that. We need more TTOCs, we need more recovery beds, we need more counselors, we need more psychological services, both from a counseling and administering medications and deciphering what those issues are and how best to overcome them. So psychiatry and psychology, because they're very different, and their capacities are very different. And we need to make sure that people have availability to those services, and they're restricted and they're limited right now. And they need to progress from that to job training and skills. And I mean, even something as simple as having your purpose and your dignity and your self-assurance and confidence, to rebuild that and regain that as an individual, that can be extremely challenging if you're coming from a place where you've spent a lot of time,
Right.
in unhealthy living circumstances. And then the other thing I think that is very important in that model is it needs to incorporate mind, body, and spirit. So all of those things actually need to be addressed.
Right.
Although it's similar to, life pillars, food, water, shelter, safety. It's the same thing. In order to heal as an individual and to move forward and refine who you are as a person again, you have to address all 3 of those things: mind, body, and spirit.
I have to say I'm somewhat surprised to hear this in a Conservative Party discussion. It's generally not a Conservative Party ideal that's being put forward there. I know that Conservative, would support healthcare and support other systems, but it sounds a little more left than I would normally hear from a Conservative Party platform.
Well, I think
in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very. I mean, don't misunderstand me. I mean, I'm as frustrated with what is happening in downtown Prince George. Actually, I don't think there's a community in this province that isn't being challenged with homelessness, drugs addictions, crime, and everything that is incorporated into that community or those individuals. And nobody wants to see that, whether they're in a village the size of McBride, or if they're in a center the size of Prince George, or if you live in Vancouver. I mean, East Hastings, oh my God, it breaks my heart to drive down East Hastings. It breaks my heart to be in downtown Prince George. And it doesn't just affect the people that are struggling down there, it affects the businesses down there, it affects you and I. I'm nervous about taking, my granddaughter down there. I don't want her to step on a needle. I don't want her to...
Right.
So, but the people that are struggling within that community, they're human beings.
Right. Yeah, no.
They are human beings.
Absolutely.
And that needs to be recognized, first and foremost. So,
which kind of goes into the next point, which is crime and lawlessness, because all of those things that you talked about are intertwined in terms of
absolutely,
homelessness, addictions, etc., mental illness, of course. A lot of those are root causes of crime and lawlessness in the province. Reverse decriminalization of hard drugs. Drugs like fentanyl, crystal meth, and crack cocaine are destructive, life-devouring substances that have no place in our society. Police should have the tools to confiscate and limit their availability. Now, speaking of the East Hastings, and I've read a lot of papers on that, and it took a long time to change that mindset from, well, first of all, to providing safe injection sites, to then the decriminalization of other things. Why would the Conservative Party want to take that back? What is the benefit that you see, or that the party sees in reversing that?
Well, see, this is a slippery slope, and I consider it a slippery slope, quite honestly, when they legalize cannabis. Now, I understand why they legalize cannabis. But it seemed to be, we seem to move forward from that. And I don't agree, and I will never agree with being able to carry around 2.5 grams of narcotics. There may be something, I don't even like the word safe narcotics. When they say, well, we're providing safe drugs, I don't consider a narcotic to be safe, period, unless it's administered within a hospital setting. I understand what safe injection sites are intended to do, which is reduce deaths. Would I prefer, if somebody was going to inject an illicit drug into their arm, that there be somebody there to respond if they have, an overdose and their life is risk? Of course, I don't want to see any more people in BC die from drug overdose. But I don't think decriminalizing and having people carrying around illicit narcotics in their pocket is the answer. And I don't think it decreases trafficking of drugs. I don't think it decreases crime. In fact, I think it increases all of those things. So I would absolutely 100% agree with the party's perspective on that. And I think that local police forces, whether it be RCMP or city or provincial, depending on where you are in the province, I think law enforcement and the justice system is struggling with some of the decisions that the government has made around narcotics and drugs and crime also. We have a catch and a release program, that is in my purview is not successful. I talked to a store owner here in Prince George a number of weeks ago, and an individual that had caused significant damage to the business. They had been arrested 169 times. That raises some serious eyebrows for me and some serious concerns. And this person, both times that they had been arrested, within the location of this individual's business, they're not sober,
right.
and they're not under the influence of alcohol, And when you look at the behaviors, particularly with people that are using that, that level of narcotic, they often their cognitive abilities are significantly declined. They're often violent, they're often aggressive, and they're often desperate for that next intake.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And the last item I want to talk about from the platform is culture and freedom. And you touched on this earlier when we spoke. You said, well, this is what the party platform says: oppose vaccine mandates and passports. While medically approved inoculation should be encouraged and vaccines offered to all British Columbians, individuals should not be mandated or coerced into receiving any medical treatment against their will, and fired government employees, including nurses, should be hired back immediately. Is there anything you want to add to that you haven't already spoken about?
I think this is an interesting one, because I don't think it includes just people that are that didn't get vaccinated. So, and that doesn't mean that only nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals. Anybody that chose to not get a vaccine should be given the opportunity to return to their job, because it wasn't just healthcare workers that lost their job due to mandates. And there are still occupations that are looking and seriously considering whether or not they'll employ somebody that is or isn't. And I think that there are particular businesses and or business owners that are still asking questions that I don't think are appropriate. I don't think somebody's medical choices, whether it be to take the COVID vaccine, to get a chicken pox, to choose to participate in a particular type of cancer treatment, I don't think that's anybody's business except the individual that made those choices. And I certainly don't think their travel, their access, their occupation should be put at risk because of a personal choice that they have made that they believe aligns with their personal values and ethics, whether those be principle, they be religion, they be whatever they may be. That's not for me to decide, and it's not for me to know.
Right. And don't you believe, though, that in the middle of a worldwide pandemic with, millions of people dying, that safety precautions have to be extended in certain circumstances to protect those who are vulnerable?
I do. However, I also don't believe that in this particular case, everything was taken into consideration with the choices that the government made at the time. I don't think there was enough information that was either available to them or that they gave the public in order for the public to make well-educated choices. And I don't think a government, whether at any level, federal, provincial, municipal, it doesn't matter who, I don't think they should be divisive within a society and separating out groups. And that doesn't just apply to the COVID situation. So during COVID, there was a huge divide within society. There was the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. And that divisiveness, people lost their jobs, people lost their families, they lost relationships, they lost friends, they lost family members. And I don't just mean to, divisive ideas, those relationships and those different groups have fractured communities, towns, I think our province, quite honestly. And I think we need to be very careful doing that with anything. And when you give any group a very particular status, and it doesn't matter if we are talking about vaccines or if we're talking about a particular ethnic background or a particular religious background, or it doesn't matter. As soon as you put division into a community, into a society, into a province, into a country, it is going to cause you more challenges than it is going to support outcomes.
Okay. Well, thank you for going through that list with me. I know it was a little bit long. I just want to kind of end with a few questions to sort of bring it back around to the Prince George-Valemount riding specifically. I know you've had a chance to visit Valemount and meet with some of the residents. What are you hearing from the Valemount residents, or McBride residents for that matter, about what's most important to them in the upcoming election?
There's a number of issues. I mean, obviously there's some very standard things. People are concerned about cost of living, they're concerned about taxes, they're concerned about the price of food. And of course, those things all interact with each other, especially when you're talking about smaller communities because of the cost of trucking, of bringing things in, and the availability of goods. You have some additional challenges in smaller communities. I know currently with the weather we've had over the past few years and some of those challenges, McBride is struggling with their aquifer and having enough water. They're in level 4 water restrictions. They're worried about that. There is some turmoil in regards to them losing their banking service. So again, there's another sector or another industry that is considering leaving McBride. Hopefully there's a solution. Either the bank that's there chooses to stay, or there may be a local credit union that's interested in coming in and making up that difference. But Valemount is very similar. There was a lot of concerns with Valemount residents, trying to find places to live. When the pipeline and the gas and oil and gas industry was there, rents had skyrocketed. They had shortages of food in their grocery store. There was challenges around transportation and accessing, certain resources again. So these are all things you can't. You made a very interesting point earlier, and it's something that I actually quite I take to heart. It's not my intention as an MLA to focus on a center. I want everybody in my riding to be well represented and heard and seen. And there's a lot of people up here in the north. It doesn't matter which riding you talk to, actually, that say, "Oh, nobody cares about the north. Everything's about Vancouver." Well, I don't want anybody saying, if I was, successful enough to be elected and to have that privilege to serve, my constituents, I don't want somebody saying, well, she only cares about Prince George.
It's a very large riding.
It is. It is a very large riding, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's my riding.
Right, absolutely. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and I mean this in a very nice way, and that's Shirley Bond. Shirley Bond has been the MLA for Prince George-Valemount for 23 years.
She has.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
What do you think your chances realistically of beating her in this election are?
I'm hopeful. I'm also very realistic. I know she's been here for a long time. And, I have never actually personally met Shirley. I've heard wonderful things about her in community. It is not my intention to say that she needs to go. I have tremendous respect for Shirley. She's done a lot of very good things in the community over the number of years that she has served her constituents. I'm not going to challenge that, and I certainly wouldn't argue that. Like I said, we've never met. Maybe in another lifetime we may have actually been friends. But I don't align with her party's ideas. And I'm not happy with where, but her party and the NDP have taken the province. And I think it's important that within a democratic system that there are options available. And so, I am here to challenge, her position, but on my party platforms, my values, and my ethics, I am not here to, to say that she's something that she isn't. Like I said, I have respect for her as an individual. I have respect for her as an MLA, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that she's done wonderful things here. But I think it's important that, people are given options and people are given choices. And I think what the Conservative Party brings to the table is significantly different than the other two parties. I think it's important people know about that. And I think it's important they educate themselves about that. And I think it's important that they make a choice that they feel is going to best represent them as an individual, as their family, as their community, and as their province.
Very nicely said. I mean, that's why we're here today, to let people know what the options are and
Absolutely.
what's available to them. Kind of ties into my last thing, and that is sort of a boilerplate thing I always ask people in interviews. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to discuss or you want to talk about?
The only other piece I would add to educating yourself is, you know, I've traveled around the province significantly in the last year. I often traveled with John, or I often did town halls regarding something that I was passionate about or I was concerned about that was happening, you know, within the province generally that came out of the current government. And over and over and over again, I have heard people say they don't have a voice. Well, that's actually simply just, it's not true. But you need to actually engage your voice. And you don't need to engage your voice necessarily by, you know, standing out there with a loud, you know, microphone and yelling and screaming and, you know, wabbing, you know, whatever that looks like to you. It doesn't have to be out in the open. But you do have a voice, and executing that voice means voting. If you are not happy with the way things are going, if you're not happy with, you know, your cost of living, if you're not happy with things that are happening in your community that are affecting you as an individual, as a family, you know, as a business owner, whatever the case may be, then you need to activate yourself and you need to actually be part of the solution. You need to be part of the change. You know, the percentage of people that voted in the last provincial election was extremely low. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing that I would like to reiterate, is that people do have a voice, but they need to use it. You know, they can volunteer, they can donate, they can express themselves. So if you have somebody in your community that's willing, you know, is new, like myself or other, you know, other candidates, whether it's our party or whatever party it happens to be, and they ask, engage. You know, we need to bring back engagement. We need to bring back collaboration. We need to bring back communication. And we need to re-strengthen our communities, but we can't do that if we're not all working together, and we can't do that if people are willing to bring positive change. But in order to do that, they have to be engaged in the process. We're very lucky here that we have a democratic system, and if we don't engage it and we don't use it, and we don't take the opportunity to express our choice, we will lose the ability to have one.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Rosalyn, thank you very much for meeting with me here today.
It was a pleasure.
We look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. Thank you for being here with me. We've been here with Rosalyn Bird, who is the Conservative Party of BC candidate for Prince George-Valemount riding, and we're here in Prince George today, and thank you very much for tuning in.